Yeah. No. Mess. What's up, everybody? How y'all doing tonight? For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Bruce Strubel. I'm a professor, activist, author. I'm based in Tallahassee, Florida. I'm originally from Altadena, California. I'm the author of By Any Dreams Necessary. It's a book on anti-racist strategies for sustainability, resilience, and environmental justice in African American communities. It's a book in which I pour all my research efforts into, all my critical thinking efforts into, to try to outline a roadmap, a blueprint for how we advance African American communities to survive the climate crisis and what seems to be the fall of American democracy, this enter into authoritarianism. And I think just grassroots strategies. How do we come together as a community? What are some of the ideas that have been working so that we could survive this? So I thank y'all for joining me tonight. I always love to come and talk to the people about what's on my mind and hear what's on y'all minds. Any comments, go right in the comments as soon as you can, and I will try to address your issues. But we got a lot to talk about tonight. It's a lot of stuff going on in the world. It's been pretty crazy. So we're going to get to it. So, go ahead, get your stuff, and we're gonna get yourself ready. We got a lot to discuss. So first, let's just get some check-ins. Let's see who's here with us. Where you at? Where you from? Throw that in the comments, y'all. And it take a while for your comments to, if you're on Instagram, I suggest going over. Oh, my boy Theo is here. Okay, Evs, I see you. How do we return to a community mindset? Oh, we got good questions right off the bat. We're going to get to it, y'all. I see you from the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. DJ, you on a submarine? What you mean the middle of the Atlantic? Talk to me. Where's the middle of the Atlantic, bro? That expression escapes me. Accountable Gray, Utah, what's up? Thank you for coming. Hey, I appreciate everybody for being here. I know y'all could be on any of these live streams tonight that's going on, and the fact that y'all came to talk with me means something to me. I see my sister Mel from Tallahassee. What's up, sis? We just was planning and plotting earlier, trying to get the community organized, and I love you for it. So thank you for coming to spend some time. All right, let's jump in. The first question I got from my sister Ebony on Instagram. She says, how do we return to a community mindset? Before I dive into that, Ebbs, I want to talk about why community is important. Today on Instagram, popular post was out, and it was a climate scientist, 83 years old, and he said, it is perhaps time that we accept that the climate crisis is here and that we have missed the opportunities to avert the worst parts of it later on in the century. Now, there's debate around this, and I talked with some of my colleagues today. There's this understanding that as the global temperature slightly increases, that we will see worsening climate crisis over the next decades. By 2045, all hell is supposed to break loose. As we get to the latter part of the century, we're supposed to start seeing unbearable climate. Not necessarily it's going to be so hot or it's going to be so cold, but that the impacts that it'll have on the entire climate system is going to make it where humans will not be able to live comfortably on the planet beyond that point. And then it's supposed to get better later on. But there has always been the idea, in earlier UN reports would suggest that if we reduce carbon emissions over the next decade before 2045, that we'll be able to avert the worst of it so that it's not that bad for our grandbabies in the near future, right? Well, today, gentleman made the claim that that's not going to cut it. It's too late. We already have went through all the thresholds, and that we, instead of trying to reduce carbon, we need to shift our focus on hunkering down and building up our resilience. So this is where what I specialize in, or at least I would say the social factors that go into resilience is something that I take a lot of interest in. And a big part of my book, By Any Dreams Necessary, is strategies for resilience for African American communities. So what is resilience, right? We talk about resilience in the sense of how much organization, an entity, a person, a community can absorb when there's a disturbance. So if you imagine it, you're just moving along normally, functioning as a normal community. People going to work, children going to school, parents going to grocery shopping, elders are being taken care of, criminals are being rehabilitated. Your community is functioning, right? Oh, I see my wife hopped on. Everybody, what's up, baby? So what happens is a community is functioning, and then a disturbance happens. That disturbance could be mass shooters. It could be a lynch mob coming to Tulsa, Oklahoma. It could be an earthquake happening in San Francisco. It could be a fire happening in Altadena. It could be these floods that are happening in Texas, right? These are adversity. Adversity is going to strike. It's a given. Now, what happens is once adversity strikes, a more resilient community can absorb the blow, meaning that it's not going to go into decline as a sharp decline as a less resilient community. That's what we refer to as absorptive capacity. Then after you absorb the blow, you're no longer at your normal level of functioning. Your functionality starts to decrease. So then they're looking at how fast can you start to adapt to your new circumstances. So then it's like, okay, the roads are flooded. You know, we got to get food to the community in a different way. We got to start taking care of our basic needs. We got to get our elders and our injured to the hospital. We got to get our hospital back up and running. We got to get these roads reopened. You start to adapt. That's your adaptive capacity. That is where you start to see some communities could absorb, but adaptive capacity is that next challenge. Then the challenge beyond that is transformative capacity. How do you transform your system so that the next time adversity strikes, you're in an even better situation and you lose even less functionality, right? So my sister Ebbs asked, how do we get back to a community mindset? And I'm going to explain to you why it's so important. All the research, and it's a great book on this called Building Resilience by, I think his name is Daniel Aldrich. And what he details in that book, he looks at cases all over the planet, and he says the key factor, whether it was in Katrina, whether it was in Vietnam, everywhere he looked, the key factor to communities being able to rebuild was their social capital, their ability to share norms, their ability to maintain reciprocity, their ability to work together when there wasn't money involved, their ability to trust each other, their ability to hold together is what increases their ability to be resilient. That was the key factor. So even if your physical infrastructure is strong and your social capital is weak, you're not going to be as resilient as another community with moderate infrastructure and stronger social capital. The social factor always gets overlooked. So this is something if you ever hear me talk anywhere, this is something I'm going to bring up, because I always want to remind people when these incidents happen, the first responders are not always the police or the paramedics or the fire department. It's your neighbors. It's the people who live right next to you who are going to be the first people who can get to you in the time of a crisis. So if people already have an organization in place in those communities and they're looking out for each other, they're going to be more resilient. So back to why community is so important. Well, today what was being discussed is that with the climate crisis being so out of whack, we're going to see more frequent situations like we saw in Altadena, like we just saw in Texas, like we saw in North Carolina. That's going to be happening more rapidly as the climate patterns start to continuously shift and make things harder for humans on this planet. As a result, our governing systems are going to be overwhelmed. We've lost the political battle to get people to care about this. And that's something I had to agree with him on. Like, our enemies did a better job with their propaganda in convincing people that we were all getting these climate crisis hoax checks. And they got everybody convinced that we made this up so that we can make a lot of money. And if you talk to the people, they'll be talking about, they'll be like, yeah, this is all Al Gore's conspiracy. They got all kind of nonsense theories to justify the continued emissions that are harming us. And it's hard to continue to argue with them when you could bring all the science for the last 100 years and they'll dismiss all that and be like, yeah, Al Gore made that up in the 90s and it's all a lie. It's man, bear, pig, like South Park tried to call it or whatever, right? So with all that said, they've outplayed us. They had the money, but we have the people, right, who care. So with that said, we're not going to curb emissions. We're not going to be able to curb carbon in this theory. So we have to focus on community, building up our community resources so that we can protect ourselves against the climate crisis. And that was being argued. And so then the question back to you, Ebbs, is how do we get back to a community mindset? I think we have to show people the value in community. If people have children, if people have parents who are elderly, and you know that you do not have the ability to care for everyone on your own, then the only way I've seen it work throughout human history is people have worked together. Like you can't raise your children on your own and take care of your parents. You need an infrastructure, a social infrastructure that allows you to do that. You could try to do it in isolation, but it hasn't been working out. And a lot of times we talk about single parent households struggling. And one way that you augment when we have the reality of single parent households, one thing that's a difference maker is when we could build communities around those individuals, right? And we bring them into community. And then guess what? Our single parent households, they perform better when they're in strong community. So, my boy David Bell, that's my boy. That's a day one. Community outreach needs to be in place again at all times. Bro, I couldn't say it any better. Community outreach is critical, right? We have to get back into collective thinking and sending out messaging, letting people know that they are invited to be a part of a community. So a group of Black women that I'm fortunate to work with, something we do is we start young. We take children at a very young age into our programming and we start preparing them for community life. I think that growing up in a capitalist system, growing up in America, you're not always taught or instructed on how to be a member of a community or why you should be a member of a community. You're taught to look out for yourself. And at best, you look out for your mama and them, like Kendrick said in that fatherhood song, right? It's like you look out for your immediate family and that's it. And I don't think people often recognize how that short-sightedness puts us in greater vulnerability. It puts us at greater risk. If all you've looked out for is your family, then you've left the rest of your community vulnerable. You are still going to be increasing the danger that you're in. So we have to take care of those people around us. And my sister, my mentor, Dr. Mildred McLean in Savannah at the Harambe House, she would always say to me when I would bring up, like, we need self-care. You know, she would be like, no, we need community care. It can't just be about yourself. And I understand yourself as part of that community, but to isolate it, like, I'm only going to take care of me, it ultimately creates more hazards and more problems that you will have to deal with. So I think I look at it community as an extension of the family. And as we start to rebuild our communities, we're building safe spaces, for liberated spaces for us to operate and raise children and take care of our elders in. And what do y'all think about that, man? I want to hear some people's thoughts. Am I tripping? Oh, so somebody says, so you're saying I need to start speaking to my neighbors? Absolutely. And I know, like, so this dude named Robert Putnam, he wrote this great book called Bowling Alone, The Decline of American Social Capital. And he talked about how, now I don't agree with his reasoning, but he was saying that since integration in the United States, social capital had like this significant decline. And he said that people went into this kind of like hunker down syndrome, that because they didn't want to interact with each other across races, that people just started to only have small, tight networks, and network extension started to decline. And that was the initial decline of American social capital. Now, I critiqued that in my dissertation, and I said that ultimately racism itself has been one of the primary factors that has caused the decline of social capital in the United States. And that is why communities, particularly African-American, Indigenous, and Latino communities, they face a lot of challenges, and that makes it hard for us to build different levels of social capital. So if you want to know more about this, I really go into detail in this in chapters 4 and 5 of my book on how racism actually impacts your ability to form community. But I'm sorry, I digress, right? My sister asked the question, How do we get back to community life? How do we get back to that? We have to show people the value in community. So my bro David says we have to reach out to people and let them know, hey, we're building a community here. You are safe here. All you have to do is come in and work towards the same goals. Like, it's not something you necessarily have to pay to enter. You belong in our community. You contribute what you can. You take what you need and you put back in. Right. And those are the understandings that we need to start reestablishing. It has to be inclusive spaces. It's not the same Black community that it was going to be in the 1950s. People are not going to stay in the closet for y'all and hide their sexuality. Women are not going to be silent in the community. Like, people are going to be different, and we need to be able to accept each other's differences, and so that we can all work towards our common goal. Now, if your goal is for you to be the ruler and dominant force over the community, it's not going to work out. So we're going to have to come up with collective ideas. We're going to have to set rules. My mentor, Dr. Huberta Jackson Lohman, she always talked to us about this concept of social or community policy, right? And this is where we're not relying on the police or the Trump administration or the federal government to give us rules that we live by. We create our own policy, our own social policy, which says that, hey, for example, a social policy idea that we came up with in a workshop we did was that women, no matter what man they're around, they will always be safe in our community, and that we would hold all the men in our community to that standard, that it is your duty and responsibility to make sure that women are safe and they're not being preyed upon when they're moving about in our community. On the flip side, one that the women came up with in our community is that, at this workshop, I should say, is that men would not be, no matter if relationships were deteriorating, whatever the case was, that men would not be forced to be separated from their children, right? And that they would have access to their children as long as they were abiding by safety standards or whatever, right? So in the absence of that, there was no excuse for a person to separate a person from his children. Now, next step of that is enforcement mechanisms. That's a little more challenging. I think often you use shaming, you use ostracism, because we can't just go around using punitive force or corporal punishment. But you use where, if you are not complying with the community standards, then you're going to be ostracized, you're going to be criticized, and you're going to have to accept the consequences of that, whatever your community determines. But these are just a lot of the ideas I go over in this book: how you form social policy, how you enact it, what kind of policies we need, what we need to really start getting back to community life. But it takes practice, Ebbs. Another thing that some communities have been working on is coming up with their own local currency. I think that's huge. I've talked about this before. It's not that simple, but as we start to see fluctuations in the dollar and with all these different crypto currencies that come about, there are opportunities to start investigating how do we get our own communal currencies that we use that get us out of some of these oppressive systems that we are trapped in from time to time. So, manhood should not be demeaned. I hear you, bro. Yeah. Now, and then we have to get into, so a big thing about community is shared norms. So we got to have shared understandings of what is manhood, what is positive manhood versus what are the negative aspects of manhood that we want to grow and move away from. And that requires healing. This requires open dialogue. This requires creating spaces for men to talk about this amongst themselves, for men to have discussions with women. We was talking about this on social media the other day because a sister had said a real man would do this, and a brother got mad at her and was just like, a woman can't tell a man how to, and they started getting caught into that trap. And I think there is spaces where women can say what they want from the men that they're interacting with and what makes them feel comfortable and safe to be around men. And then there's also a space where men say, okay, the women have told us what they need. This is what we need from each other. How do we bring those things together? But we can't stay in those consistent battles between our two, between men and women. And I don't think we move. I think we stay trapped in a cycle like that, and we got to start looking to move forward. So thank you for bringing that up. Most people don't even come outside anymore. Woo. She cooking, y'all. What's up with that? Y'all not coming outside? I know it's hot. I know the weather is changing, but I implore you to get out and touch some grass. Too many people checking out, too many people living extremely unhealthy, and it's causing, I mean, post-COVID, man, people been scared to come out the house. I think you got to get outside. You got to touch that grass, y'all. But and sitting down at these computers all day, sitting down in your cubicle all day, that's just as bad as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. You got to get outside. You got to use your body. You got to use those eyes, get direct sunlight without any blockages. My sis Ebony is always lecturing me about that, saying just all the stuff we expose ourselves to by just staying in the house could be just as problematic as taking a risk and going outside. So I always implore people to go out and explore nature. And that's another thing we do with the youth. We get them off them tablets. We don't even have to force them off with our groups, y'all. We get them out. We take them to lakes, streams, wildlife reserves, anywhere to get Black children outside so they can see what's going on. And we've had a lot of success doing that. I detail how we built the program right here in this book in chapter 9. By any means necessary, I might even read y'all an excerpt in a little bit, just so y'all can see I'm not BSing y'all. I got a lot of good ideas in here, and I want y'all to check this out. Who Arted? What's up, bro? Thanks for joining us. Yeah, we get vitamins from the sun, bro. Walking barefoot in the grass. See, people be knowing, and it's so crazy because there's all these stereotypes about Black people not wanting to be in nature, and I think that was forced on us. A lot of it was survival, negative survival tactics that we adopted. I remember my sister, Dr. Yele Chele, she was I don't know where she's a professor at right now, but she was giving a presentation at the Black Studies Conference, and she was talking about Black people in outdoor spaces. And one of the men she interviewed, she gave some chilling testimony that he gave her. It was an older brother, and she said when they asked him, "Why don't you like to go outside into this forest and around these trees?" He said, "Y'all see trees, I see where my family was hanging." So you think about that trauma and it not being safe for Black people to go into the forest areas like that, and it not being safe for Black people to really be out like that, and that may have contributed to our agoraphobia almost collectively, right? Where people just don't really want to be out unless they are in a space where they know who all going to be over there and that it's going to be safe. And I think we've been adjusting to that for some time, but there have been consequences for people going outside. So we have to create safe spaces to do so. And we have to be intentional about that to make sure that from a young age, we getting Black people back out in the water, back out on the lake. We take the kids fishing. We climbing rope. Now, I'm not into the extreme sports stuff. That might be a little bit much. If some of y'all into that, I'm not knocking it. I don't need to go that far. I don't need to go mountain climbing and rock climbing and stuff like that. I just want to get outside and breathe some clean air. And I know that's a challenge because all our neighborhoods don't have clean air. So I'm speaking from a place of privilege that I live in a neighborhood where the air is relatively clean. But when you got those opportunities, you got to take them, y'all. If you're not getting those opportunities and you could relocate, then that's something to consider doing. So what else? What else y'all want to talk about, y'all? What else we got on here? And if I don't see your comment right away, give me a second. It takes a few minutes for them to pop up. All right, let me go to my listing since y'all don't got nothing, right? All right, hold on, y'all. I'm just looking. What do I want to talk about? All right, so I talked about birthright citizenship ruling and the end of checks and balances. I was discussing this today with some of my colleagues on social media, and I asked the question, right? Is the United States still affect a republic? Does the United States still have an effective democracy? All right. So consider a democracy is a system, or at least in our system, we have representative democracy as realized through our republic. It's not perfect. I wouldn't even go as far as to say that it's an effective democracy. I think it's a low functioning democracy. But at its core, we know we should be able to have a vote in an open election. We should be able to elect representatives who enact laws, and then that we have our different governing bodies. We have our judiciary, we have our executive branch, and we have our legislative branch, and they all have responsibilities, and there's supposed to be a balance of power to keep anyone from becoming too powerful and allowing them to infringe on our civil rights that are guaranteed to us by the Constitution of the United States. So I asked the question, does the Constitution still have sway if the president now seemingly has the authority to circumvent judicial oversight? So, I mean, many of y'all may know how the judicial oversight came into play from Justice John Marshall. This is back near the country's foundings, with one of the first major decisions by the United States Supreme Court. And while it killed a political party, the justice who made it was what they called a federalist at the time. And what he did is he cemented that the federal government, the Supreme Court, would have primacy over what the interpretation of what's constitutional or what's unconstitutional. So now we reached a situation where, in recent decision, and then with some policies that were baked into that big, beautiful bill, where it seems, and I'll wait for further analysis, that the courts have lost some of their ability to put the executive branch in check. So I pose the question that if President Gavin Newsom, right, because I like to do this for my conservative listeners, President Gavin Newsom were to declare through executive order that all American citizens had to turn in their firearms, right? He's going to send troops in to collect them. This is a clear violation of the Constitution. But my understanding, and I could be wrong, so somebody check me if I'm wrong on this, is that under the current situation, President Gavin Newsom would be able to avoid President Gavin Newsom will be able to avoid any injunctions by a lower court, right? Unless it was through a class action lawsuit, and only the people named in that lawsuit would be able to reap the benefits of said injunction. And then if he were to ignore that again, and the court were to attempt to hold him in contempt, they wouldn't be able to do so unless there had been a bond already paid. And also there's other mechanisms that will make it so that it would be very difficult to hold him in contempt and put any penalties on him if he ignored it. So therefore he could continue on with this unconstitutional action, and it will be no mechanism in place to bring him to heel. So that is the scenario that I heard the policymakers who I respect describing. And I'm wondering, is that accurate? Is the POTUS in a position where they now no longer could be held in check by the Supreme Court or by the court system? That's what seems to be the case. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I've been waiting to hear a good argument as to why that's not the case. But when I looked through the bill, when I looked through the sections, when I looked at the potential outcomes of that recent SCOTUS decision, that's what it looked like we were moving towards. If that is the case, if I'm right, I think it's safe to argue we have transitioned. I feel you, bro. We have transitioned away from a Republican form of government, and we have moved on into some kind of plutocracy. We always had plutocracy elements, but I think it becomes more of a defined dictatorship in that sense, a kind of a constitutional dictatorship where you have the branches of government are still there symbolically, but their power is so reduced that you have kind of like this de facto dictator in your president, because ultimately they could rule through executive order. And while you could put up symbolic gestures to stop them, they have the decision to make if they choose to ignore them or not. And I think when you look at what the dissenting opinion was, that's what the dissenting judges Sotomayor and Supreme Court Justice Kenji, that's what they were saying. It was just like, we are veering very close to authoritarianism and giving the president the decision to choose if they want to follow the constitutional law or not. They have the right to decide, and that's not how it's supposed to be. So when I was bringing this up, a lot of my friends said to me, they said, well, that's just always been the case. The Constitution is nothing more than a piece of paper, and they're showing us today that they could enforce it when they choose to. And I had to sit with that for a minute. I think there's a lot of truth to that. And as a Black person, our history is ripe with situations where we've been given rights on paper only to see them snatched back on paper or through action. So I'll be honest and say this is not something that starts with President Trump. I saw things from the Obama administration when they killed that American citizen, Anwar al-Awlaki or whatever, and they killed his kids also through drone strikes. And I was like, wait a minute, that's an American citizen. He's supposed to get a trial. You know what I mean? There has to be due process. And I remember Democrats, diehards, they argued me down. They were like, no, the president has the right to do that. He's an enemy combatant. I was like, no, we don't know. We didn't see a trial. So technically, that's damn near a lynching to me, right? That if you don't give a person who's due a trial and we don't get to hear the evidence and get them and have them convicted by a jury, I don't know. I don't know that. But they use the Patriot Act and they say, you know, he's a terrorist, so we could do what we want. So that was one of the previous violations of, you know, the executive going too far. I think the Patriot Act was another example where we start to see the executive branch, Citizens United. I could go back further. Let's see, the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, which allowed the president to take unilateral action to start Vietnam. We could go back to Roosevelt when he took the canal, and he even bragged about it. He said, I took the canal. I'm not a, people arguing in the comments. We're going to ignore that. But I think President Roosevelt, TR, he said, I took the canal while Congress debated, right? And this is when they took the Panama Canal without going through the official channels to even get a declaration of war. He sent it was the Hay-Ponsford-Barilla Treaty. They created a puppet government, signed a deal with them, and seized control of the Panama Canal. And it was just another example of like these unilateral actions by the executive branch, and they almost built a bridge. And there's several more, but they built a bridge to where we are today. So I don't want to go too deep into that, but yeah, I don't think it starts with Trump. Okay, Dean Bell says there's a difference between human rights and civil rights. Elaborate on that, Dean. There's clearly a difference, and I know Malcolm used to talk about this all the time. Civil rights are kind of your rights that are given to you through your government organization, right? As a, you know, like as the civil rights assigned to you as part of being a citizen of a particular country, right? I think human rights are your inalienable rights that you are born with, that if we were to evolve as a species, we will recognize that all people have to have these basic core rights protected in order for us to exist as a human species. And we haven't gotten there yet. It's a degree of evolution that is going to take for us to recognize human rights. I think we've gotten to the point where we could write them down what they should be on paper, but enforcing them and protecting them, you need look no further than the Gaza Strip to see that humanity has yet to start to respect human rights of all people. Human rights seem to be restricted to certain individuals, the money people and the corporate class and people who could articulate. But for our people who are suffering or who've been colonized by different invaders, we see no respect for their human rights yet. So I hear you, bro, and I'm with you on that. There is a huge difference between human rights and civil rights. I consider myself a human rights activist. I'm an advocate for civil rights as well, but human rights is where we have to start. So thank you for pointing that out, Dean. What else we got? Congrats on your transition. We support you. Trump. Yeah, on TikTok, y'all, the degenerates are here. Oh, y'all have fun, y'all. I'm gonna block all your comments later. All right. Let's see what else we got. My sis said we need some of y'all to come over to YouTube. All right. Because we need more audience over there. She said we're not getting a big enough audience on YouTube. All right. So another thing, let's talk about this flood in Texas, right? This is, and I don't have all the details yet. So far, I saw the number was at 85 and rising. Those dead, they said the river just within an hour, 2 hour period. It rose several feet, caught a lot of people off guard. I know there was a summer camp, a girls' camp in the area, and they got trapped. I think 27 of them passed away. It's terrible, man. And my heart goes out to all the people being impacted by this. And it just brings me right back to where I was in January when my hometown, Altadena, California, went up in flames. And, I had left the day before all this happened. Me and my family were out visiting. We went up there. I was looking at, I was showing my kids where I grew up and stuff. Then to get on the plane, come home, and get the call the next morning like, hey, the whole city is gone. It was terrible. And every time I see these kinds of catastrophes, I'm reminded that everything I read about the climate crisis when I was growing up and when I was studying, this is exactly what they were telling us was going to happen. And that, storms that should be happening every 100 years are starting to happen annually. Hey, happy birthday. Oh man, you almost got me, bro. Too bad I'm too swifty for that. I gotta ignore some of these comments, y'all. Like, it's something about when Black people be talking and trying to uplift, it pisses off a certain group of people. Y'all know who they are, and they just get really mad and they want to come and start hating. And I don't get it. Like, we not talking to y'all. We talking to the people who care. Y'all can keep scrolling, bro. But back to what we was talking about. I'm sorry, I be getting sidetracked at times. But these floods, these wildfires. Oh, I'm so glad my bro asked the question, and this will help me transition. You think it's climate crisis? Are people doing this deliberately? I want to answer this carefully. I have not been presented with credible evidence that people have the ability to weaponize the weather with any accuracy. I know there are some devices that they've been using to kind of create rain. I read about something that happened in Dubai a while ago, but I just, if there is credible evidence, then, I could be behind on this. But I know that we have more droughts. We had in California, for example, you had millions upon millions of trees die over a period of time throughout the 2010 to 2017, right? So you have all these trees dying. I know that dead trees are flammable. I know that when you have droughts and you have erosion, and you have more weather events, that's a recipe for floods and certain disasters to take place. I know that when you removed a lot of your forests, when you've removed a lot of green spaces, when you have areas that are more vulnerable, when the floods happen, when wildfires happen, when hurricanes happen, those are going to be the places that have the hardest impacts. So there is a deliberate element to this, but I don't think it's as simple as someone in an office or someone in a laboratory saying, we're going to create this freak storm to go to this area. Now, did they pull the levee in Katrina? I remember when Spike Lee had that. Spike Lee had people saying they heard explosions, right? I don't discount what those people are saying, but I can't prove it. But what I do have evidence of for the climate crisis is that when they do the models, when they do these modeling scenarios, and they say if we increase the average global temperature by 0.5 degrees Celsius, by 1 degree Celsius, by 2, what does the weather variation start to look like in those time periods? What is the climate, the conglomerate, or of all those different weather patterns in a long-term cycle? What does it start to look like? These were the outcomes that they were saying we were going to have. They were saying we would see increased flooding in certain areas. They were saying we would have drier brush, more wildfires, more frequent windstorms. You see what I'm saying? Like, so for that Altadena situation, you could get arson, but you can't plan the Santa Ana winds to come that early and to be more significant than they have been in any other time. But you could have the arson, but you see how it has to be like that recipe of multiple things to come into such a widespread disaster. So many factors have to be in place. So is it a degree of negligence? Is that negligence deliberate or intentional? I would not deny that at all, right? Because when you look what's happening right now in Altadena, there are corporations and wealthy people out there buying up all that real estate. That there's some intentionality to that. I don't think that all happens by happenstance. There were warnings that a massive fire could come for quite some time, and people did not take the necessary precautions. So, and these floods that we keep having, I promise you, they're. I don't want to say I'll promise you because I'm not a prophet of any sorts. I'm just using the science that I was made aware of by attending different conferences, by sitting in lectures and reading the work of climate scientists. They were saying for the last century that this is what increased carbon and methane and greenhouse gas emissions will lead us to. And people want to deny it, people want to dismiss it, but I mean, everywhere I look on the planet, we're facing severe climate crisis, and it's going to be an ongoing problem. And the only way to survive it is to build resilient communities. To some areas will need to be abandoned. They're not going to be able to have functional communities there. It'll be too many frequent events. Other places will need to be hardened, and people will need to start looking at building emergency response, emergency preparedness networks that don't rely on the government. We won't be able to rely on FEMA, which is being damn near defunded to support ICE only. We won't be able to rely on them to come in and save us. So we should have learned this for Black people. We should have learned this after Katrina. And I remember I was in undergrad when Katrina happened. And I remember saying to my professor, like, yo, like, we need to be planning for the next time this happens. Like, but when that kid had to get that bus to drive everybody out of there because they had no way out, people was just waiting on their rooftops for people to come save them. Black people should never allow themselves to be in those circumstances again. But we refuse to learn certain lessons for some reason. And, you know, it's not just a Black problem. I think everybody is kind of facing this and looking at the lack of reliability of the government to come and save you. So who's going to do it? It can't just be every man or woman for themselves. So this is back to where we started this conversation. It's going to rely on communities to save themselves. We're going to have to be able to build communal structures to get us out of some of these situations because they're going to continue to happen. Now, if I'm mistaken, and it's not a climate crisis and this is all just like some kind of weather machine, then bring me the evidence, y'all. I'm never ashamed to look at evidence. So bring it to me. All right. Man. They said I'm race baiting, y'all, because whenever you talk about race, you know, it makes racists uncomfortable. Hey, bro, I don't care. Let me see what else this is saying. I think the Black community, many of our folks are stuck struggling with personal issues and simply can't get to focusing on community. All right. This is true. And my research on Black communities turned up these same results. And I talk about this in my book, Fight Any Dreams Necessary. Right? But this is very true. So this goes back to what my brother David said. This is why outreach is so important, because often when people have been away from communal life for so long, people have forgot that there's values in it, right? Or that there's value in it. And that if we could start to show people like, hey, come back to the community, the same way you try to bring people back to the church for example. Like, hey, I know you got caught up in your personal life, but come back to the organization so we could work together, and maybe you can help me and I can help you. A lot of things are harder when you're in isolation, right? And I think some of the stories I've seen recently, I was reading about a group of single mothers who, they found community and they were able to alleviate each other's burdens by working together, taking turns, right? So if we start doing things in community, we find that we have more options. There's more solutions on the table than when you're just trying to do it on yourself. Now, the problem is, the challenge is that you have to make sacrifices. It requires you to trust people, and you may not be a trusting person, and you may have gotten burned when trusting people before, and that is something that we have to reconcile with. It requires you to accept boundaries and limits on your own personal freedoms, that you can't just go and do whatever you want, because now you're a part of a community and you have to show respect for the organization so that we can all live in proximity together. Those are sacrifices that in our Americanization, we as Black people are not always comfortable making, when our ancestors, that was normal to them. I think that's one of the big things. And I see that as a part of when people come over from other countries, they come over here with that communal mindset at first, and over generations, you see that start to deteriorate. And when by the time they got grandkids, the grandkids is just as American as everybody else, and they start to lose it. So I think that hyper individualism, that adherence to the free, strict ideas of capitalism and greed, that destroys community, and it rewards individualism. But we see individualism does not always work, especially for people who are not at the top of a capitalist system. So I think collective approaches, collectivism is a part of that solution, that we have to be communal and collective in how we look at solving a lot of these problems. Trying to solve some of these problems, like how you going to solve a crime problem as an individual? Maybe in a movie you could John Wick it, and go kill all the criminals, but that's not realistic, right? We got to come up with community solutions. So when we talk about voting, when we talk about the programming we need in our communities, education, if everyone continues to just make individual decisions, I don't see a lot of our problems getting solved. But I think ultimately people are going to be forced into community. But here's the other caveat. We can't always just think people being together is community, right? Because like all these people together without organization and structure is chaotic and it's dangerous. So it has to be organized. And this is what Marcus Garvey used to talk about a lot. He would really be saying that Black people in America, and he was from the Caribbean, but he recognized the potential of Black Americans with the proximity to all the wealth and resources we had here in the States. He said, if we got organized, we could be like the central engine in this global African economy. And then in a global economy, a global trade economy, that Black people could be a center, a nexus of that goods move through and by us. And then we could build wealth through that. And I think that people got away from that through that Universal Negro Improvement Association approach. But that all starts at the communal level of people recognizing there's value in who we are and what we're trying to do, and we could do it together. What's the saying? You want to go far, you want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, go together. Just things to think about, y'all. Ooh, I'm on my soapbox tonight. Oh man. All right. What else y'all got for me? Uh-oh. Let's go ahead and talk about it, because this the one that got me in trouble. But I welcome the trouble. But a lot of Black people got mad at me, and they was going hard on me on TikTok on the comments, because I said, like, immigrants are not our enemy. And people didn't like this. But I'm gonna tell you, right? You could get rid of every immigrant in this country, And I don't believe that the economic situation for African Americans would dramatically improve, because the way white supremacy operates, it will shift and adjust to the current reality. So it will pit you against other people and it will scapegoat them and tell you, like, this is the reason you don't have any money. But how is no one paying attention to these corporations and the unfair policies that have been put in place that allow them to exploit people and then to avoid us? Like, I don't, scapegoating the immigrant community really rubs me the wrong way. And I understand that there are immigrants who have committed crimes, but there are citizens who commit crimes. And it's more likely that you faced a crime from a citizen than you did from an immigrant. So they keep talking about people being illegal. And I'm like, I prefer to refer to people as undocumented, because people are not committing a crime just by existing. But some of y'all are getting so defensive over these lines drawn in the sand by European people in the land. Like, we all know this land is stolen. So how we get to the point where we out here defending these lines like they ours, like we put them up, like these boundaries benefit us. So I feel some kind of way about it. I know I'm on the. I feel like I might be in the minority on this issue, because like the way people was coming for me, they call me everything but a respectable black man, bro. I'm a coon. I'm a tether. I'm a traitor to the FBA nation and all this. And I'm just like, whoa, like y'all out there, bro. Like, all I'm saying is these people are human beings at their core, and they're trying to have better lives. And maybe they're not the problem. Maybe it's corporate wealth and a 1% of the population having with 95% of the wealth. That's the actual issue, and not these people who are scraping to get by, taking lower wages and lower in jobs that you weren't interested in anyway. So yeah, I think immigration has been important to the development of the United States economy. Immigrants pay taxes, immigrants add value. There are people who are problems, and give them a trial. They should be held accountable. There should be justice served. But I just don't think mass deportation is the answer. I never been pro mass incarceration or pro the state sanctioned violence against anyone. So it bothers me when I see so many black people getting behind such a narrative. Like, when did y'all become so pro police? Like, what happened? When y'all be like, it just be like, yo, I didn't know y'all felt like that. I was talking to one of the homies. This dude is a certified gang member, and he's sitting here supporting the police. And I'm just like, but I don't know. So, I mean, everybody politics is wild, but it just that was trippy to see someone supporting ICE. It's just like, yo, they out there arresting people without without warrants, just kidnapping people just dressing up like ICE agents, deciding they go do it to they kidnapping innocent families. Like, why are y'all so confident that that won't happen to us? And you can look at my comments when I put these clips up, and people be like, no, the FBA is gonna be good, they'll never do that to us. And I'm like, that is mind-blowing to see black people saying stuff like it could never happen to us. We good here. The white man got our back. I'm like, are y'all serious? Even my white friends be looking at y'all like, yo, y'all, it's not that safe for y'all. So okay, so I know there's the black and Latino conflicts in prison or whatever. I respect that, but I don't think the majority of people are prisoners, and I don't think the majority of Latinos are sitting around thinking about how to hurt black people. They thinking about how can they get ahead. And I don't think so. I understand in a criminal culture, y'all might have gang wars and conflicts, but I don't know that the black gangs are innocent in those conflicts. Like, I don't know. I can't say like, oh, y'all were innocent and the Latino gangs just came and attacked y'all. So, but I recognize I never been in prison, so I can't speak to that with authority. So I recognize that. And you said on the streets also between Black and Latino gangs. But I mean, you would say that Latino gangs kill more Black people than Black gangs? The essays kill more Bloods than the Crips do? How is it in Chicago? In places where they're, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know that I know they got conflict, but I think that they all in that conflict together. And I think I would say the same thing. I don't think more Black gangs are killing more Latinos than the other Latino gang members. Normally, the people who are the most violent to you are right there in your proximity. So, and even with all that said, how does that turn into y'all supporting the police? I don't know. You got to explain that to me one day, bro. Because it just looked like people being manipulated, people being subject to so much propaganda that they are adopting ideas that traditionally would have been foreign to them. So Melissa says, I have to tell you, I'm a Republican and I don't agree with what's happening. I respect that, Melissa. I think you got to be more vocal about that and letting your people who represent you know that what's going on isn't cool and that you don't support these human rights violations. But let me say something, because I don't only hold you accountable for that. I think one of the things that allowed that is that when Obama was in office, when Biden was in office, there was a whole bunch of caping. And whenever they would do something wrong, when we would speak out about it, y'all would never get to hear from us. It would just they would only show y'all the talking heads who would kind of make excuses for everything. So I wonder, is that's what's happening on y'all side? Are we not getting to hear from those Republicans who are critical of it? But I don't know, because I talked to some hardcore Republicans and they ride or die with Trump no matter what. They say it's nothing he could do wrong. So yeah. I feel you. In Jersey, y'all being more vocal. I respect that. So I appreciate that. Continue to speak out. Protect your voice at all costs. So where does that leave us, Shaw? Where does that leave us? I don't see anybody supporting the police. I just see Black people deciding that this illegal immigration issue is not our problem. Thank you. Thank you for putting that up there. This is why terminology is so important, right? The phrase illegal immigration is a dehumanizing term, and this is a tactic of war. It's how you villainize people. It's very similar to what the Nazis did with the Jews or whatever, right? When you scapegoat someone, you have to dehumanize them first. So you strip away their humanity and you refer to them as illegal, right? So I used to do that when I would teach American history. I would do this thought experiment with my students, and I would say, I would say to them, ultimately, I would say, okay, basically the thing was, I would convince my students to support slavery, right? And the way I would do it is I would say, okay, so let's say I got to hustle. We could make $100,000 in a couple of months. And then once we get set up, we could be making anywhere from, $500,000 to $750,000 annually. All we have to do is get some land and get illegals to come and work on that land for free. And they would be like, I don't know about it. That's it. And I'd be like, well, these illegal people, they're already criminals. They already broke the law. What did they do? They're just illegal. What did they do? Did they hurt somebody? They're illegals. That's all that matters. You don't need to know much more about them. They're degenerate, illegal. They're rapists. They eat animals. They hurt children. Where's the evidence of this? Don't worry about it. They're illegals. And then I would take a poll, like, how many of y'all would support, incarcerating these people and making them work for us so that we can make $250,000, $300,000 a year off of their labor. And you'd be surprised how many people I would win over the course of the argument, where they would start and be like, no, I would never support slavery, to wait a minute. These people are already incarcerated. They're already criminals. They're already bad people. And I don't have to show any evidence of any of this. I just have to use these key terms. And it kind of creates this situation where that's people, people don't think of you as human. They think of you as an illegal. So that's why I have a problem with that kind of terminology. It's intentional to dehumanize them. If you think of this as these are people, Black people, Latino people, Asian people, Asian Pacific Islanders who came to the United States to get citizenship. Some of them even got naturalized and became citizens, and they're being denaturalized, right? Now they're illegal because of a change in the law. But you know who else could become illegal through a change in the law? You. And I think people have to stop ignoring that reality. It's nothing for them to give an executive order and to say people who came into being a part of the United States in this way are no longer citizens. Or if you committed a crime in the past, one of these crimes, you have lost your citizenship. We're going to round you up for deportation. Why do y'all think that this is impossible? Y'all think that Trump is that good of a guy? He respects the Constitution so much he would never do something like that? Like, all there needs to be is a need for it to happen and someone to benefit from it. So I think we have to be very careful with how we throw these labels around. I know that the conservative side did a very good job popularizing that term, illegal alien, illegal immigrant, but they're just ways to dehumanize people. For example, our Haitian brothers and sisters, I was trying to explain this to people earlier. Their temporary protective status was revoked. They were here with approval. Now that it's been revoked, they are being detained. How is that not everyone's problem? With the stroke of a pen, people went from legal to illegal, just like that. How is that not everyone's problem? If it can happen to them, why can't it happen to you? You think that we're just like so much better off with the government that they would never do that to us? Are you sure about that? How certain are you? Does your history support that they would never do something like that to us? I need y'all to be realistic. I need y'all to be critical thinkers. If white supremacy, racism is targeting one group, then targeting another group, what makes you think it won't circle around to you? And then, thank you, sis, deporting people outside of our country to other places that they're not even from. Like just dropping people off in place to Sudan, to Southern Sudan. And they could do it to anyone. There's nothing to stop them. If they came and picked me up right now, how would y'all protect me? Y'all gonna protest? And they said, oh, he violated this law, so we picked him up. I'm supposed to be given a trial, right? But if they you see what I'm saying? Like, you see how crazy this could get? This could happen to any of us. And if we know police can shoot a black person dead on camera with no consequences, why do y'all think that an ICE agent could deport you with no consequences? Tell me why you don't think it's possible. I just want to hear why that could never happen. And I don't mean just to like one person, why that couldn't become a widespread practice of, I don't even know if there's a term for it, illegal deportation, or what they say when they deported the one guy by mistake to the place in El Salvador. They had a term they came up with. They said it happened by accident, a clerical mistake. So a deportation that happens that way. Why do y'all think that's so impossible? I want to hear y'all reasoning for that. Why won't it happen? Because black people are that safe here in this country? Do y'all think it hasn't happened? Y'all think no innocent people have been deported yet? People who were not illegal immigrants? You think our government is that efficient? You think ICE has a process that prevents that because they're concerned about it? Have they ever said they care about it? Have they said this is how we're going to prevent it? Or are you just assuming it because you want to assume the best about the candidate that you think you align with? Or because you actually think that Mexicans are a problem in this country and they took your job? Is that how you rationalize this? I don't know, y'all. I need y'all to do some critical thinking and really dig into how are you arriving at these conclusions. Were you watching a news channel perhaps, or a media program that told you that it was happening legally and only through a fair process? Did you fact check it? Did you check some other sources? I'm just asking questions here, man. Anyways, I've been on here too long. I implore y'all to keep learning, to keep your mind open to different ideas, but to stand firm on your principles. Don't be so easily swayed and manipulated. I think Malcolm always used to say, and I'm paraphrasing, that too much of this media have you supporting the colonizers and hating the people who being oppressed. And I think we all got to pay attention to that. All right. Make sure that you're on the right side of history and that you're not standing with the same people looking to destroy you after they get what could have been your potential ally out the way, so that you're the only piece left on the chessboard. Is it like a game of pool? Y'all catch my drift. Anyways, man, everybody be safe out there. I'll be back next Monday. Shoot me any questions. Be sure to check out the book I was supposed to read to y'all tonight, but I ran out of time. I went on these long diatribes, but it's By Any Dreams Necessary. And it's just, again, anti-racist strategies. How do we move forward as a people? How do we keep our people safe through a climate crisis, through a collapse in democracy? How do we survive? How do we thrive? How do we move forward? Check out the book, y'all. TikTok, Amazon, Apple Books, Spotify. The ebook is there. The audiobook is there. Wherever you get your books from, it's available. All right, y'all. Have a good night.